March 19th, 2018. It's a sunny spring day in the laid-back Houston suburb of Spring, Texas.
Spring, Texas, that's where you go when you want to escape the city. It's a great place to raise a family.
It's about 30 miles north of Houston proper, and it has a lot of trees, so it gives like a rural vibe, like a suburb vibe.
And unlike its neighboring metropolitan areas, Spring is renowned for its low crime rates.
I would categorize Spring as a relatively safe area. It's very residential.
Spring is a quiet area. You don't hear a whole lot about crime.
But at 6 p.m., one family is beginning to panic.
51-year-old Mickey Willis's family hadn't heard from him in 10 days. He had missed some really important family events, and that just wasn't like him.
So Mickey's father, A.W. Willis, decides to check the rental home where Mickey lives.
The landlord actually went out there with A.W. to get him access to the house.
Thanks again for doing this.
Of course. I just hope he's okay.
But immediately upon opening the front door, it's clear something's wrong.
That's when they smell the foul odor.
We can't go in there. Something's wrong. I'm calling the police.
Yes.
Now, they were really faring the worst.
Police are at the scene within minutes.
So when police got in there, they don't see anything alarming. They don't see clothes thrown everywhere or any scene that would look like there was a disturbance. But what they did notice audibly was that they could hear the TV still playing. So they go up to the room, the bedroom where the TV was playing.
The smell got worse and worse as they made their way up to the bedroom.
The television was on a true crime show at full volume, like a taunt to the police. It was scary.
It looked like there was someone lying under the blanket on the bed.
Officers cautiously approach and are taken aback by what they discover.
They lifted up the cover and just dropped it.
They found Mickey lying on the bed, and he was in an advanced stage of decomposition, so he had been dead for quite a while.
He was literally decomposing and rotting and had flesh flies literally feeding on his body.
We need homicide immediately.
It was like something out of a horror movie. How did this happen to Mickey?
Eric Mickey Willis was known across Texas for his unmatched wit and humor.
My dad was very comical. He just was a jokester. He always laughed, smiled, found some kind of humor in any situation, basically.
He was an amazing father, even though the relationships with the mothers of his children did not work out.
Like, me and my dad, we were really tight. I would, talk to him all the time, call him on the phone. All the time. Whenever I had something good going on, he was the first person I called.
Mickey was also known as a jack of all trades.
My dad has always been an entrepreneur. He was a hardworking man. He dabbled in the music industry. He raced horses. As a matter of fact, he had 3 award-winning horses.
He was also a certified auto mechanic.
He loved cars. He liked fast cars. So I guess he just liked racing. I guess you can put it like that. Maybe he liked the fast life.
Mickey's most recent endeavor was opening his own demolition company.
His business was pretty successful because of the innovating ideas Mickey brought to the table.
He found a way to smash the trash where he would compact it even tighter to get more trash in one load because you got to pay to dump. He was just very business savvy.
But despite his dedication to the grind, Mickey always went the extra mile when it came to helping others.
He was selfless. He cared about other people. He would volunteer his company's services during Hurricane Harvey, and he always was assisting with the Houston Fire Department, so much so that he received an award from them for his services and how he was helping them and helping the community.
Everybody loved him. Everybody. He was just a spirit you wanted to be around.
So it was never difficult for Mickey to find a date.
He was definitely a ladies' man. He was very handsome, and the ladies were very attracted to him.
You see pictures of him like he was a smooth guy.
He created a lot of relationships with his charm. He had a few other women, but then the next one that we actually to know and meet was Cynthia.
Damn, Mickey, what's your name?
Cynthia.
Cynthia.
He was just really taken aback by her beauty when he met her. He found her unique, found her beautiful.
From the get-go, they both had something to relate to, and that was their desire for a big family.
Actually, I have 4 kids, all girls.
All girls?
Yep.
Whew.
Yeah, it's a trip, but they're amazing.
I would actually love to be a part of a big family like that.
Oh, really?
Yes.
They quickly found that their goals for the future were really aligned, and so there was so much more than just a physical connection there.
Before long, the couple decided to take the fast track to making their hopes and dreams a reality.
They ended up going to Vegas and eloping there. They didn't even tell us.
And back in Spring, Texas, their union continued to blossom.
Cynthia had a great job. She worked at a local behavioral therapy center.
She was a successful mental health counselor. Her income, combined with Mickey's demolition business, allowed them to live comfortably while continuing to build their family.
Together, they had 3 kids.
But now, Mickey has been found deceased in the couple's bedroom. And based on the state of decomposition, he's been there for quite some time.
At this point, the decomposition was at least 10 days. And this is a gruesome scene.
Detectives turn off the television, which has been eerily projecting a true crime series, and get to work examining Mickey's body.
Despite the advanced state of decomposition, investigators are able to determine how Mickey died. He was shot on the left side of his head behind his ear.
There was a spent casing from a 9mm weapon laying on the pillow next to him. It was fairly obvious that it was an execution-style shooting as he slept.
He never saw this coming.
As shocking as the discovery of Mickey's body is, there's an important question on everyone's mind. Where is Cynthia?
Still no sign of the wife.
After seeing Mickey's body, police are concerned about Cynthia and the children.
The couple lived in the home with their 2 adult children and the youngest son who was about to graduate high school.
Could they have been kidnapped? Could they have been killed?
Police could only hope there weren't going to be multiple victims in this crime.
"51-year-old Eric Mickey Willis had a successful demolition business and a large, loving family, with his wife Cynthia by his side.
He was always laughing, joking around. He was just always happy.
However, the house that was once filled with love and laughter is now swarming with police.
Mickey had been fatally shot on the left side of his head, and his body was terribly decomposed.
But where is Mickey's wife, Cynthia?
Still no sign of the wife.
Put out an APB out on the car.
Yes, sir.
The couple lived in the home with their 2 adult children and the youngest son who was about to graduate high school.
Could they have been kidnapped? Could they have been killed?
Police only hope there aren't multiple victims in this crime.
When investigators check the doors and windows, they don't find any signs of forced entry.
We had ruled out any type of home invasion, any type of a planned hit from outside.
Whoever did this either had a key to the home or they were let in by somebody.
As investigators put out a bolo for Cynthia Willis and her car, the tragic news of Mickey's death spreads to the rest of the family.
I gotta tell you something.
I remember my grandfather called me to tell me that they found your dad in the house over there. And I just broke down. Toya called me and she said, they found a body in the house. And I just remember screaming. I just screamed. I just fell on the floor and I just kept screaming that, we waited too late. We waited too late to call and to check. If we would have pushed the issue a little bit further, could we have found him sooner? It was just so many questions. It was guilt. It was anger. It was a lot of emotions that we were all feeling.
Mr. Willis?
I gotta call you back.
A.W. Willis is still reeling from his son's death, but he wants to help investigators in any way that he can.
So when was the last time you talked to him?
A.W. says no one in the family had heard from Mickey for 10 days.
Okay, and do they all live in Houston?
Yes.
My sister Erica, she was pregnant. She had my nephew March 12th, and I was calling my dad, and I was trying to tell him, Erica's in labor. The phone was going to voicemail. In my head, I thought, well, maybe him and the kids and Cynthia took a trip because it was spring break. So we said, okay, well, let's give it some time. We just kind of started making up things in our head to make us ease ourselves.
But the family's concern escalated the following Monday.
So Monday comes by, and that's when we find out that he didn't show up to work. So we're like, okay, that's kind of odd because he was very hardworking. Like, he worked around the clock. He wouldn't just abandon a job like that.
He had never not shown up for work. I mean, he was just a guy that was faithful to his work.
A.W. says the family's next step was to contact Cynthia.
I dialed the Cynthia number about 11 or 12 times, right after another. Nothing but a voicemail.
He tried calling his grandchildren who still lived in the home, but they weren't answering either.
And I'm concerned about all of them, not just him, because I couldn't reach anybody.
A.W. says that's when the family decided to reach out to Mickey's landlord.
We reached out to the landlord and kind of insisted, like, hey, we want you to go out there, check, and open the house.
Detectives inquire about the relationship between Mickey and Cynthia.
Did he say anything was wrong?
Well, they've been having some domestic problems.
And according to A.W., Mickey seemed to be at the end of his rope.
That's what he told me. He wanted out. And I heard something about a divorce.
He was checked out. He was done.
Detectives in Spring, Texas, investigating the murder of 51-year-old Mickey Willis, are speaking with his devastated father, A.W.
According to Mickey's father, Mickey and his wife Cynthia had been going through a rough patch lately.
Well, they've been having some domestic problems. He put it out. And I heard something about a divorce.
My dad was checked out. He was done.
But did Mickey ever go through with the separation? A.W. doesn't have an answer to that question.
He wasn't sure if his son had filed for divorce, but he knew it had weighed on him heavily.
You know, people tell you things, you don't go off and tell everybody because you don't know the truth.
This was a 30-year relationship that was very rocky. They would fight quite frequently.
There were issues in Cynthia and Mickey's relationship for years.
You know what it was about?
And that's been for years, you know.
He said they was having problems, but he didn't tell you what kind of problems.
Well, some of the problems they had was so obvious, you know. You could see him being hurt, you know, hit, things of that nature.
Hitting?
A.W. says the fights between Mickey and Cynthia sometimes escalated into physical violence.
You know that he's been hit. Like
by her?
Yeah.
I've had it, Cynthia.
You don't think I've had it too?
I don't know if they reported that. He was trying to protect the girl, you know. He loved the girl that was his kid. He loved her.
And A.W. says shortly before Mickey went missing, he and his wife got a phone call from Cynthia that made them believe she was trying to mend her relationship with their son.
She called my wife, and she was saying, "But I'm gonna try to do better." And my wife said, "Well, we love you, but you need to try to give your husband respect." And
Cynthia said that she had done a lot of things wrong, but she was trying to do better. She was going to fix things, and she was going to make this marriage work.
But did their marital woes just drive them further and further apart?
Based on what investigators were hearing, they started to wonder if those marriage problems could have driven Cynthia to do something.
Maybe she wasn't another victim in this crime. Maybe she did this.
And I don't think he got the respect from the young lady, and never has, in the sense.
But as police continue searching the entire Houston metropolitan area for Cynthia, detectives make a valuable discovery in Mickey's text messages.
As they go through those phone records, investigators see that Mickey has been communicating with a woman named Jackie Caldwell.
When detectives dig deeper, they uncover near constant communication between the two, starting in the weeks leading up to Mickey's murder.
Jackie was a childhood friend of Mickey. They grew up together and lost contact, but then reconnected.
It became very obvious through their communications that they were having an extramarital affair.
In the text messages, detectives can see that Mickey and Jackie had a date planned for the evening of March 9th.
So she's with him. They're spending time together the night before he gets murdered.
If Mickey was planning to patch things up with Cynthia, did he let Jackie know that night?
Did Mickey go meet with Jackie that night to break things off with her?
To get to the bottom of this, detectives call in Jackie for questioning.
All right, Ms. Caldwell, we need you to be honest with us.
This might be a classic case of a woman scorned.
Detectives investigating the murder of 51-year-old Mickey Willis have just brought his lover, Jackie Caldwell, in for questioning.
Mickey's wife, Cynthia, and their 3 adult children are still missing.
Could Jackie have something to do with it?
Detectives know from reviewing Mickey's text messages that he was on a date with Jackie just hours before he was killed. But according to Mickey's father, Mickey and his wife Cynthia were planning on patching up their relationship.
Did Mickey go meet with Jackie that night to break things off with her?
All right, Ms. Caldwell, we need you to be honest with us.
This might be a classic case of a woman scorned.
But Jackie appears heartbroken by Mickey's death.
She seems genuinely upset that he's gone.
Detectives ask Jackie about the texts they found on Mickey's phone, and she readily admits that they were involved in a romantic relationship.
It's true. I was with him Friday night. We had dinner together.
The last time she saw him was at dinner on March 9th.
Jackie, did something happen that night? Did y'all get into a fight?
Absolutely not.
So there was no mention of a breakup?
Not at all. Him and his wife were the ones breaking up, not us. We were in love.
She told the officers that she loved him, that he was not breaking up with her, but that they were actually planning to go away together after Mickey's divorce.
Jackie says that Mickey was dead set on them being together, that it was only a matter of him filing for divorce and leaving his wife.
It's why we got together for dinner, to celebrate the start of our new relationship. He was finally leaving his wife.
And you have no idea where she is now?
No.
But is Jackie telling the truth?
It became a who's who in this situation, and they had to do some more investigating to determine what really happened.
In their search for answers, investigators turned to Mickey's inner circle of friends.
During the course of their investigation, investigators interviewed one of Mickey's best friends and co-workers named Lamar Banks.
He tells police that he and Mickey have been friends for years. They even worked together in construction.
Sit down, so we talk every day. Talk all the time.
Because they were so close, Mickey confided in him a number of things that he had not disclosed to anyone else.
He really was in love with Jackie and wanted to divorce Cynthia to start a life with her. According to Lamar, The situation with Cynthia was far worse than anyone realized, even Mickey's close family members.
That's crazy. Just something about her just wasn't right. She been a terror for the last past 30 years, man, that I've known her.
He witnessed a toxic relationship of constant arguing and a lot of physical assaults that took place where Cynthia was assaulting Mickey.
She swapped everything.
But he had no idea how bad it was until one day when he was dropping off Mickey at home.
Thanks for the ride, man. I appreciate it.
We'll see you tomorrow.
All right, we'll get with you.
All right.
Took him home, and we pulled in the driveway. I'm sitting my phone, so and there's somebody come out the corner, y'all.
It was Cynthia, and she had a knife.
Mickey trying to go in the front door, and she come around the side, on the other side of the garage, and she had a butcher knife. I said, Mickey, blowing the horns at Mickey. I said, here she come.
Hey, Mickey!
Texas detectives are speaking with Lamar Banks, the best friend of murder victim Eric Mickey Willis.
Lamar said Mickey's relationship with his wife Cynthia had become more and more violent, and Cynthia even came at him with a knife.
Blowing horns at Mickey. I said, here she come.
Hey, Mickey!
But it was too late.
When he turned around, man, she hit him with that knife in his arm or his shoulder. He said that damn blade come out at the back of it.
So Cynthia stabbed him in the shoulder?
Oh, hell yeah, she done stabbed him, man. She done stabbed him, man, hell yeah.
Lamar says he immediately tried to help his friend.
And I was reaching for my pistol in the console. I said, I'm gonna shoot that.
But Mickey told Lamar he didn't need his help.
He said, now. They grabbed him. They go in the house. And he shut the door.
Mickey was a family man to his core, and he didn't want to do anything that would break up the family.
Mickey was a person that where his kids was more important to him than what Cynthia was doing to him. He was a family man the way he was raised.
At that time, like, he didn't press charges or he didn't want her to go to jail or anything like that.
But once the couple's youngest son was nearing his high school graduation, Mickey was ready for a new life and a new relationship.
He said, this boy here finna get ready to finish school. And I'm done. I'm gone.
It was kind of one of the situations like, I'm just going to stay with her till these kids get out of here and graduate and become adults, and then I'll plan my escape.
Never known her to own a gun or anything.
I don't know what Mickey was shot with, but that's what she keep on the gun. Keep that right in her titty or her purse.
It's a shocking revelation about the esteemed mental health counselor.
With every new discovery, Cynthia looks more and more capable of committing murder, and police are becoming more and more concerned about the welfare of the children.
So they're looking at this and seeing like, okay, there is the capacity that she could also harm her own children. So time is of the essence, and they were really trying hard to find not only Cynthia, but the children.
But they still have no idea where they could be found.
However, when they subpoena Cynthia's cell phone records, investigators finally get a lead on her whereabouts.
So using the GPS information from the cell phones, detectives were able to track down the night of the murder. Cynthia left that home and traveled to a hotel in Spring, Texas.
Not long after, it's tracked to a home in Humble, Texas. That's about 30 miles from the Willis's residence.
Property records show that the home belongs to Cynthia's sister.
Investigators race to the home, fearing the worst, but instead, they're met with relief.
Can I help you?
The couple's 3 kids are safe and sound.
Is your mother, Cynthia, here?
No. Why?
Cynthia is nowhere to be found.
Everyone in the home is clearly worried and confused, including Cynthia's sister.
When Cynthia asked to stay with her for a while, she didn't think much of it.
The entire time they've been there, it has been very normal. Very normal.
Did you talk to your sister about what's going on? Where's Eric?
We're not. I assumed either they were, again, separated and left again. And I didn't ask questions. We're not super close.
Cynthia's sister says she was at the house last night, but no one has seen or heard from her since.
But I have not talked to Cynthia.
When detectives reveal that Mickey is now dead, the family members are stunned.
This is the first I'm hearing about my dad being gone.
Mickey's daughter says the last time she saw him was March 9th, after he was home from his date with Jackie.
My dad got home probably about 12:30, a little after midnight. It was a normal night. My dad came in, he was tired.
You still up?
Yeah, you know how us night owls do.
I talked to him for a little bit, and then he went to his room, we went to sleep.
Good night, sweetheart.
All right, Dad.
Love you.
I love you too.
But early the next morning, her mother seemed panicked.
My mom woke us up Saturday morning and said we were leaving. I don't remember what time, maybe 7, but it was early. She woke us up.
Wake up. Wake up now. We gotta go. What's going on? I'll explain to you later. Come on, we gotta go. We gotta go. Come on.
She didn't give them any options of taking clothing or toothbrushes or anything like that. She rushed them all out of the house and they left.
They just assumed their parents had gotten into another fight, and that's why they were leaving the house.
They argue a lot. I mean, I guess it was getting worse, but we didn't really pay that no mind. It was just our new normal.
What happened then?
She said we were going to my aunt's house, and then we been here ever since. My mom said we couldn't go back home.
But the siblings say that on the night of the murder, none of them heard a gunshot go off.
And you didn't hear any scuffling, you didn't hear any noise?
I didn't.
Between the time you went to bed and she woke you up?
I didn't hear loud. I didn't really hear anything.
Could Cynthia have used the television in the bedroom to drown out any noise?
When the officers got there, the television was on and it was turned up loud. It was true crime stories that were on the TV at the time Mickey was killed. And so you start to wonder, was she trying to acclimate the environment, those others who were in the home, to the sounds of gunshots? Was that part of her plan? And it seems like it was.
Cynthia's youngest son, 17-year-old Eric Jr., echoes his sister's claims.
So he talks about how, everything seemed normal the night before. The next morning, the mother rushes him out of the home.
But he adds another crucial piece of information.
According to Eric, the day after they moved into his aunt's house, his mom made a chilling statement.
She said something really messed up, man.
What did she say?
She said that she hurt him real bad.
She said it was out of self-defense, that Mickey tried to hurt her, and she was only protecting herself.
He never thought his mom had hurt his dad so bad that she'd killed him.
I mean, they fight all the time. I just thought it was another fight.
But now Eric Jr. feels confident that his mom is a killer, and his siblings agree.
She killed him. She killed our dad.
Whenever a child gives up that kind of information that implicates one of their own parents in a murder, that's something you have to take seriously.
All 3 of Cynthia's children agreed to cooperate with the investigation and gave detailed statements.
They've got what they need to put together a murder case on Cynthia.
But they still have to find her.
For Mickey's loved ones, the waiting game is hard to stomach.
I was just pissed. I was livid. I was angry. And it's just like, why can't y'all find this lady? Because where is she and when is she going to jail? I was very, very upset because why are you hiding now?
Finally, on March 24th, police get the tip they've been waiting for.
They get a tip that Cynthia may be at an apartment complex down close to Pearland, Texas, which is further south of downtown.
And fortunately for investigators, the tip pays off.
They pull her over during a traffic stop and they arrest her.
She's taken in without incident.
From there, she's transported to Harris County for an interview with detectives.
When investigators take her in for questioning, what's interesting about this whole dynamic is she is mum. She doesn't say anything. She doesn't admit to anything, confess, but she also doesn't deny.
Instead, after she's read her Miranda rights, she asks for an attorney.
Even without a confession, investigators have what they need to charge Cynthia with first-degree murder.
Cynthia's 3 kids all agreed to testify against their mother in court. That alone was a huge win for prosecutors.
But a tragic twist of fate will turn the case on its head.
Eric Jr. was shot to death in a similar fashion to his father.
He had been murdered 2 weeks before his dad's case went to trial.
Investigators preparing for the murder trial of 48-year-old Cynthia Willis have just learned that one of their key witnesses has been killed.
Eric Jr. was shot to death in a similar fashion to his father.
He had been murdered 2 weeks before his dad's case went to trial.
Everyone's first thought was, did Cynthia have something to do with this?
We were all like, she killed him. Like, that was the first thought, because we knew that he was a key witness.
However, that theory is soon discounted.
It turned out Eric was senselessly killed by a fellow classmate he did not get along with. The young man was sentenced to 50 years in prison.
It's unfortunate that little Eric passed, but he was saved from that trauma of having to testify and in some way.
In August of 2021, nearly 3.5 years after Mickey's death, Cynthia goes on trial for murder.
Based on Cynthia and Mickey's prior domestic violence incidents, prosecutors outline a violent and abusive relationship.
They painted a picture of a very narcissistic person, a controlling person, and a bully.
Over the prior 2 decades, Cynthia proved herself capable of rage and violence time and time again.
She abused him throughout the relationship. She committed an aggravated assault on Mickey by stabbing him in the shoulder. That showed her propensity for violence.
Prosecutors contend that on the day Mickey Willis was murdered, Cynthia's rage finally reached its peak.
They had text messages that proved Cynthia knew Mickey was planning to divorce her and start a new relationship with Jackie.
The most dangerous time for a victim of domestic abuse is when they're trying to leave the relationship.
Her violence and her rage and her anger could not handle the idea of Mickey having the nerve to leave her. She felt like if she couldn't have him, then no one else could.
On the evening of March 9th, Cynthia decided to put her plan into action.
So I don't believe that Cynthia snapped. I believe that she thought about this for some time.
This was diabolical. This was premeditated.
She turned up the TV to mask the sound of the gunshot.
Cynthia pulled out the gun and shot him in the back of the head, so he had no idea what was happening.
He didn't have a chance to say goodbye to anybody. And she killed him in a space where you're supposed to feel the most safe, in your bed in your room.
That morning, when the reality of what she'd done began to sink in, Cynthia started to panic.
And that's why she rushed the kids out of the home, didn't really have a game plan. The kids didn't even have clothes or belongings. And it speaks to just how messy the whole situation was.
Prosecutors lay out a convincing argument. However, a shocking curveball threatens to derail the entire case.
Before trial, the couple's daughter gave prosecutors a sworn statement regarding her mother's violent past and the abuse that occurred.
And so we hoped that she would be cooperative on the stand. But then when she took the stand, it was the complete opposite. She started saying, I don't remember, I don't recall, I didn't say that.
We would ask her a question, she would answer it in a way that she apparently thought was favorable to her mother. I remember points during her testimony when I was fighting back tears in my eyes because you could see a daughter who is trying to stand up for her mother, who is staring daggers at her from counsel table where she's seated.
Prosecutors call out the inconsistencies during cross-examination.
We already had a prior sworn statement from her in our back pocket, and so when she would deny making that prior sworn statement, the statement would come into evidence.
The jury knew. The jury knew she was lying.
And looking back on it now, I realized that that was the day that we won the case.
After a week-long trial, jurors returned with a verdict. They find Cynthia guilty of the murder of her husband.
I remember when they said guilty, Stephanie was sitting next to me, I just grabbed her hand and I started crying. I mean, I hadn't cried many times through that proceeding, and I cried then because we made it.
Watching the trial, I was relieved because a lot of people in these type of situations always have a little bit more sympathy for the woman.
During sentencing, Cynthia continues to profess her innocence.
She took absolutely no responsibility. When she finally had her opportunity to speak on her own behalf, she wanted to try to throw Mickey under the bus.
She said, I was the victim, that Mickey had cheated on her throughout their marriage. She talked about how he hung out with very suspicious people. And so she was just continuing to kind of dog his character and really speak down on him.
Regardless, the jury has little sympathy for the former mental health counselor.
The jury sentenced her to 50 years in prison.
A 50-year sentence for Cynthia means that she will not be eligible for parole until August of 2047. And at that time, she'll be 77 years old. So this pretty much is a life sentence.
Was it enough to say, you know, I feel completely satisfied? No, but, you know, it would do for now.
This was a case, obviously, of domestic violence that got out of hand. There's no question that Cynthia had been physically abusing Mickey all those years.
I mean, this is someone whose job was counseling others about their mental health, and then she turned around and killed her husband. It really shows that this can happen to anybody.
For men, I know it's difficult to admit that you're getting abused, but it's okay. Just because she's a woman doesn't mean it's okay for her to be verbally abusive or physically abusive. So my advice is get out while you can, because it's not gonna get any better.
My dad just was a very loving, caring, giving person.
And had it been what my daddy would have wanted, we all would have been a big, happy family. So we cremated him. Everybody's got a little mini urn. Everybody's got a necklace or a bracelet. So he's actually truly getting to spend the amount of time he wants with all his family as much as he wants to. He's everywhere with everybody.
Abuse is never okay. If you or someone you love is in an abusive relationship, there is help available. Call the Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE.
For almost 11 years, a quiet house on Seymour Avenue in Cleveland, Ohio, stood like any other home on the street. Children walked past it on their way to school. Neighbors drove by without a second glance. People living nearby saw a man coming and going, mowing the lawn, playing music, laughing with friends, and living what appeared to be an ordinary life. But behind the walls of that house was a nightmare that almost nobody could imagine. Inside those rooms, 3 young women were trapped in a world where time seemed to disappear. Days became weeks. Weeks became years. The outside world moved forward while they remained locked away from it. Their families had searched for them. Their photographs had appeared on missing person posters. Their names had been spoken in prayers, on television reports, and in conversations filled with fear and uncertainty. But as the years passed, hope became harder to hold. Many people believed they might never come home. Then, on a warm afternoon in May 2013, a desperate voice broke through the silence of a Cleveland neighborhood. A woman stood at the doorway of a house that had hidden unimaginable secrets for nearly a decade. She was thin, exhausted, and carrying a little girl in her arms. She looked at a neighbor and spoke words that would shock an entire nation. Her name was Amanda Berry. She said she had been kidnapped. She said she had been trapped inside that house. She said she was finally free. At that moment, the world learned that a mystery that had haunted Cleveland for years was not a story about three missing girls who had disappeared forever. It was a story about survival. It was a story about three women who endured years of isolation, fear, and cruelty. And it was a story about a house that had hidden a terrible secret in plain sight. The man responsible was Ariel Castro. To many people in the neighborhood, he was simply a familiar face. A local man who drove a school bus. A person who smiled, joked, played music, and greeted people around the community. Nobody imagined that behind his friendly appearance was a person capable of creating one of the most horrifying captivity cases in modern American history. The house at 2207 Seymour Avenue was not a place of comfort. It was a prison. A prison built not with concrete walls or steel bars, but with fear, manipulation, threats, and years of psychological control. Inside that house were three different stories. 3 lives interrupted. 3 young women who entered that place believing they were simply accepting a ride, or trusting someone they knew. And none of them could have imagined that the moment they crossed the doorway, their lives would change forever. The first was Michelle Knight. In August 2002, Michelle was 21 years old. She was a young woman trying to rebuild her life, while facing personal struggles, and fighting to maintain a relationship with her young son. She was not a famous person. She was not someone the world knew. She was simply a daughter, a mother, and a person trying to find her way. On a summer day, she vanished. Her disappearance did not create the same nationwide attention as other missing person cases. There were searches. There were questions. But because Michelle was an adult and had experienced difficulties in her personal life, investigators considered possibilities that suggested she might have left voluntarily. That assumption would later become one of the painful questions surrounding the case. What if someone had looked closer? What if someone had understood that Michelle was not someone who had chosen to disappear? Because inside Ariel Castro's house, Michelle was fighting a battle nobody knew existed. Months later, another young woman disappeared. Her name was Amanda Berry. Amanda was only 16 years old. She was a teenager with dreams, friendships, and a future ahead of her. On April 21, 2003, she finished her shift at a Burger King restaurant in Cleveland. Like any other teenager after work, she was thinking about getting home. She called her sister and told her she was on her way. It was the last time her family heard her voice. That phone call became one of the most painful memories for those who loved her. A simple goodbye. A normal conversation. A moment nobody realized would become the final connection to the life Amanda had before. Her family refused to stop searching. They put up missing posters. They waited for answers. Amanda's mother, Luana Miller, carried the pain of not knowing what happened to her daughter. She continued believing Amanda was alive, hoping one day she would walk through the door. But years passed. And that hope came with an unbearable cost. In 2006, Amanda's mother died without ever knowing the truth. She never saw her daughter return home. She never knew that Amanda had been alive the entire time. She never knew that her daughter was only a few miles away, trapped inside a house hidden among ordinary homes. Then came the third disappearance. Gina de Jesus. In 2004, Gina was only 14 years old. She was a young girl who lived near Ariel Castro's family. She knew his daughter. She recognized him. He was not a stranger walking out of the shadows. That familiarity made the situation even more devastating. When Castro offered her a ride, Gina had no reason to believe she was walking into danger. She was a child who trusted someone who appeared familiar. And after that moment, she disappeared too. 3 missing girls. 3 families waiting for answers. 3 names that remained unresolved for years. But while Cleveland searched for clues, the truth was hidden behind a locked door. Inside the Seymour Avenue house, Ariel Castro controlled every part of the victims' lives. The outside world became something distant and almost unreal. The sound of cars passing by. The voices of neighbors. The changing seasons. All of it continued just beyond the walls. But inside, time moved differently. The victims were forced to live according to Castro's rules. He controlled when they could move, when they could eat, and when they could interact with each other. He created an environment where fear became a constant presence. The threat was not only physical. It was psychological. Years of isolation changed the way they experienced the world. When someone is trapped for a long period of time, survival becomes the priority. Every decision becomes about avoiding danger. Every moment becomes about making it through another day. For Michelle, Amanda, and Gina, survival meant holding on to pieces of themselves even when someone tried to take everything away. They had to remember who they were before the house. They had to believe that somewhere beyond those walls, life still existed. They had to believe that one day, somehow, someone would find them. But Ariel Castro continued living his normal public life. He went outside. He talked to neighbors. He acted like an ordinary person. And that was perhaps the most disturbing part of the entire case. The nightmare was not hidden in a remote location. It was not buried underground. It was located in the middle of a neighborhood where people lived their daily lives. A place where nobody imagined that 3 missing women were still alive. A place where a locked door separated an ordinary street from an unimaginable tragedy. For nearly 11 years, the world searched for answers. And inside that house, 3 women waited for a chance. A chance that finally came on May 6, 2013. A mistake. A door left open. A moment when opportunity appeared. And when Amanda Berry stepped into the daylight carrying her daughter, she did something that changed everything. She opened the door not only for herself, but for Michelle Knight and Gina de Jesus. She opened the door to a secret that had been buried for years. And she revealed the horrifying truth about the house on Seymour Avenue. A house where 3 lives had been stolen. A house where hope survived. A house that would soon become known around the world as the Cleveland Horror House. Long before the world learned the address 2207 Seymour Avenue, it was simply another house in another working-class neighborhood on the west side of Cleveland, Ohio. Its faded exterior blended naturally with the surrounding homes. The small front porch overlooked a quiet residential street where neighbors recognized one another by sight. Children rode bicycles between cracked sidewalks, and the sounds of barking dogs mixed with passing freight trains in the distance. It was the kind of neighborhood where life moved according to familiar routines. Every morning, garage doors opened before sunrise. Parents hurried children toward school buses. Factory workers left for early shifts. Retirees watered their lawns. On warm evenings, families sat on front porches talking while the scent of grilled hamburgers drifted through the summer air. There was nothing about Seymour Avenue that suggested one of America's most disturbing kidnapping cases was quietly unfolding behind one ordinary front door. Cleveland itself had always been a city defined by resilience. Located along the southern shore of Lake Erie, it had once thrived as one of America's great industrial centers. Steel mills, shipping yards, railroads, and manufacturing plants built generations of middle-class families. Entire neighborhoods grew around factories where fathers, mothers, sons, and daughters often worked side by side. But by the late 20th century, much of that prosperity had faded. Factories closed. Jobs disappeared. Thousands of families struggled to survive economic decline. Entire blocks began showing signs of neglect. Some houses were abandoned. Others were carefully maintained by residents determined not to let their communities disappear. Cleveland became a city where hope and hardship often existed on the same street. The neighborhood surrounding Seymour Avenue reflected that reality. Many residents had lived there for decades. People watched one another's children. Neighbors borrowed lawn equipment. They exchanged holiday meals. If someone needed help fixing a roof or replacing a fence, someone nearby usually offered assistance. Trust was still part of everyday life. It was not unusual for neighbors to know the names of each other's relatives, or recognize the sound of familiar vehicles pulling into driveways. That sense of familiarity would later become one of the most unsettling elements of the case. Because the man responsible for unimaginable crimes did not hide from the neighborhood. He lived within it. Ariel Castro was not invisible. He was known. People remembered hearing him play guitar on his porch. Others remembered neighborhood cookouts where music and laughter carried into the evening. Some recalled seeing him washing his car or chatting casually with people walking past. Children recognized him because he drove a school bus. Parents saw him transporting students every weekday. To many, he appeared dependable. Ordinary. Approachable. Nothing about his public appearance suggested the violence concealed behind the walls of his home. Yet appearances can become powerful disguises. The ability to separate public identity from private behavior has appeared in numerous criminal cases throughout history. Some offenders build carefully maintained versions of themselves, allowing neighbors, co-workers, and even family members to see only selected pieces of their personality. That contrast would become painfully clear in the years ahead. The Castro house itself had once been like many others on the block. Built decades earlier, it was modest in size, with aging wood floors, narrow hallways, and rooms that reflected the architecture of mid-century American family homes. There was no underground bunker. No towering security fence. No obvious sign warning outsiders that something terrible existed inside. From the sidewalk, the house looked tired but ordinary. The windows reflected sunlight, like every other home nearby. The mailbox stood beside the front steps. Season after season, snow collected on the roof during Ohio winters before melting into spring rains. Autumn leaves settled across the yard. Nothing about the exterior demanded attention. That ordinary appearance became one of Ariel Castro's greatest protections. People rarely suspect extraordinary evil hidden inside ordinary places. Most imagine dangerous criminals operating from isolated cabins, abandoned warehouses, or distant forests. Few expect them to live next door. Yet evil often survives precisely because it refuses to look unusual. During the early 2000s, missing person cases rarely received sustained national attention unless certain circumstances pushed them into major headlines. Social media did not yet dominate daily communication. Facebook was still in its infancy. Smartphones had not transformed how quickly information spread. Families relied heavily on local television stations, newspaper advertisements, missing person flyers, volunteer searches, and community organizations. Every disappearance became a race against time. The first hours were critical. Investigators interviewed witnesses. Volunteers searched wooded areas. Photographs appeared on telephone poles and storefront windows. Parents answered endless questions from detectives while trying to hold themselves together. For Michelle Knight's family, the uncertainty began in August 2002. Michelle had experienced instability throughout much of her young life. She had endured hardship that many people never fully understood. Those circumstances influenced how authorities initially viewed her disappearance. Because she was 21 years old and facing personal challenges, investigators considered the possibility that she had chosen to leave. That assumption proved devastating. Unlike child abductions, disappearances involving vulnerable adults often face additional complications. Sometimes investigators must determine whether someone left voluntarily or became the victim of a crime. Every hour spent considering the wrong possibility reduces valuable opportunities to uncover the truth. Michelle's story quietly faded from public attention far sooner than her family wished. Yet inside one house across the city, she remained alive. Months later, another disappearance shocked Cleveland. Amanda Berry was everything people associated with an ordinary teenager. She laughed easily. She enjoyed spending time with friends. She worked part-time after school. She argued with family members about everyday teenage issues before making up again. Nothing about April 21, 2003, suggested it would become the final day of her normal life. When Amanda failed to return home after work, concern quickly turned into panic. Family members called friends. Friends called classmates. Police organized searches. Television stations interrupted programming with photographs showing Amanda's smiling face. Her image appeared across Ohio. Community volunteers distributed thousands of flyers. Psychics claimed to know where she was. False leads flooded investigators. Each tip offered hope before collapsing into disappointment. As months became years, Amanda's bedroom remained waiting. Her belongings stayed where she had left them. Birthdays passed. Christmas mornings came and went. Every holiday reminded the family that one chair remained empty. Still, they refused to stop believing. The disappearance affected not only Amanda's relatives, but the entire community. Parents became more protective. Teenagers received repeated warnings about accepting rides. Neighborhood conversations increasingly centered on safety. People wondered whether a predator was targeting young women. Nobody knew the answer. Then, less than 1 year later, fear returned. 14-year-old Gina De Jesus disappeared while walking home from school. This case felt different. Gina was younger. She vanished in broad daylight. Friends had seen her only minutes earlier. Families throughout Cleveland watched local news broadcasts with growing anxiety. Now 3 young women had disappeared within a relatively short period. Rumors spread quickly. Some believed a serial killer was operating nearby. Others suspected human trafficking. Still others imagined the victims had somehow run away together. Without evidence, speculation filled the silence left by unanswered questions. Each theory reflected the same painful reality. Nobody knew. Meanwhile, only a few miles away, Ariel Castro continued building a prison inside his own home. The transformation did not happen overnight. It evolved gradually. Locks became stronger. Doors became barriers. Windows were covered. Rooms changed purpose. Objects that once belonged inside an ordinary family home became instruments of confinement. Every modification served one purpose: prevent escape, control movement, maintain secrecy. Control was central to Castro's world. It was not enough to imprison someone physically. He sought control over thoughts, routines, relationships, and hope itself. Experts who later examined long-term captivity cases often explained that psychological domination can become even more powerful than physical restraints. When victims are isolated for years, uncertainty becomes another form of imprisonment. Will today bring violence? Will tomorrow be worse? Will anyone ever come? Those questions repeat endlessly until time itself loses meaning. Inside the Seymour Avenue house, calendars held little significance. Outside, Cleveland continued changing. Children grew older. Businesses opened and closed. New presidents entered the White House. Wars began overseas. Technology advanced rapidly. Music changed. Fashion changed. Entire generations of students graduated from high school. Yet inside those hidden rooms, 3 women remained disconnected from almost every part of that changing world. The contrast was heartbreaking. The city experienced ordinary life. Inside one house, ordinary life had stopped. Neighbors occasionally noticed unusual details. Some remembered hearing loud music at odd hours. Others recalled seeing windows covered unusually tightly. A few later admitted they occasionally wondered why certain parts of the house always seemed closed off. But isolated observations rarely form complete pictures. Most people naturally explain unusual events through ordinary assumptions. Perhaps someone values privacy. Perhaps renovations are underway. Perhaps music is simply being played loudly. Human beings often search first for harmless explanations. That instinct protects everyday social life. Unfortunately, it can also hide extraordinary crimes. Ariel Castro understood routines. He understood predictability. As a school bus driver, he followed schedules every weekday. Morning pickups. Afternoon drop-offs. Regular interactions with children, parents, and co-workers. His public responsibilities strengthened the image that he was trustworthy. Few occupations demand greater confidence from communities than transporting children safely to school. The contradiction between that public role and his private crimes would later horrify investigators. How could someone entrusted with children's safety secretly imprison young women inside his own home? The answer was both simple and deeply disturbing. Predators often depend on appearances. Trust can become camouflage. The safer someone seems, the less likely others are to question them. As Cleveland entered the late 2000s, many residents believed the missing girls would never be found. Some families reluctantly prepared themselves for the possibility that their daughters had died. Memorial events replaced search parties. Anniversaries replaced active investigations. The photographs remained, but hope grew quieter each year. No one could imagine that only a short drive away, behind an ordinary front door on Seymour Avenue, 3 women still waited for someone to discover the truth. The neighborhood continued sleeping peacefully each night, unaware that one modest house contained enough suffering to haunt an entire nation once its doors were finally opened, long before the headlines, before the courtroom cameras, before the nation learned the address on Seymour Avenue. There were simply 3 young women living ordinary lives. They were not connected by friendship. They did not know that their paths would one day cross. They had different families, different dreams, different struggles, and different futures waiting for them. If fate had been kinder, they might have lived their entire lives without ever hearing each other's names. Instead, they would become forever linked by one man and one house. To understand the horror of what happened, it is important to remember who they were before they became victims. Because they were never just names in a criminal case. They were daughters, friends, sisters, a mother, teenage girls laughing with classmates, young women trying to build lives that, like everyone else's, were filled with ordinary hopes. Their stories did not begin with captivity. Their stories began with life. Michelle Knight had never known what it felt like to grow up in complete stability. Born in Cleveland, she experienced a childhood marked by hardship, uncertainty, and emotional pain. Home was not always a place of comfort. The people who should have protected her were often struggling with problems of their own, and as Michelle grew older, she learned to survive more than she learned to dream. Even as a child, she developed a quiet resilience. People who knew her often described someone who desperately wanted acceptance. She cared deeply about those she loved and longed for the simple feeling of belonging somewhere. Life rarely gave her that certainty. By the time she reached adulthood, Michelle faced challenges that many people twice her age had never experienced. She became a young mother. Her son became the center of her world. Whatever hardships she endured, she wanted something better for him. She dreamed of stability. Of having a safe place to call home. Of proving that her difficult childhood would not define the rest of her life. But reality was complicated. Financial struggles, unstable relationships, and legal issues surrounding custody placed enormous pressure on her. Every day felt like another attempt to hold her life together. Yet she continued trying. She attended appointments. She searched for opportunities. She believed there was still a future worth fighting for. On August 23, 2002, Michelle left home for what should have been an ordinary day. She had an appointment concerning the custody of her son. She never arrived. For her family, confusion quickly replaced routine. Hours passed. Then an entire day. The silence became impossible to ignore. But Michelle's disappearance unfolded differently from many other missing person cases. She was 21 years old. An adult. Because of the instability surrounding parts of her life, investigators initially considered the possibility that she had chosen to leave voluntarily. That assumption would become one of the greatest tragedies surrounding her disappearance. The people searching for Michelle did not know she was already fighting to stay alive. Inside a house only a short drive away, every hour mattered. Years later, Michelle would speak about the loneliness of knowing that the outside world might believe she had simply walked away. It was a devastating realization. While she endured unimaginable abuse behind locked doors, the search for her gradually faded. Yet Michelle refused to let hope disappear entirely. Even in captivity, she tried to remember who she had been before everything changed. She remembered her son's face. She remembered sunlight. She remembered freedom. Those memories became acts of resistance. They reminded her that the woman trapped inside the house was still the same person who had once dreamed of building a better life. Months after Michelle disappeared, another family entered the nightmare. Amanda Berry was almost the opposite in personality. Where Michelle's life had been marked by hardship, Amanda's world revolved around school, family, friends, and the ordinary excitement of being 16 years old. She enjoyed music. She laughed easily. She loved spending time with people close to her. Like many teenagers, she argued with family members over small things one day and hugged them the next. Nothing about her life suggested extraordinary danger. She worked part-time at a Burger King restaurant. The job gave her a little independence and spending money. It also gave her confidence. She was growing into adulthood while still enjoying the innocence of adolescence. To her mother, Luana Miller, Amanda was still a little girl. Parents often carry two versions of their children in their hearts. The child they once held in their arms, and the young adult standing before them. Luana wanted Amanda to have opportunities she herself had struggled to find. She worried when Amanda stayed out too late. She celebrated birthdays. She believed her daughter had an entire future waiting. On April 21, 2003, Amanda finished her shift at work. The evening felt ordinary. She called her sister to say she was heading home. There was no fear in her voice. No urgency. Just another conversation between family members who assumed they would see each other again later that day. She never arrived. At first, her family assumed something had delayed her. Perhaps she accepted a ride. Perhaps she stopped to visit a friend. Perhaps the bus was late. As darkness settled over Cleveland, those ordinary explanations disappeared one by one. Calls went unanswered. Friends had not seen her. Nobody knew where Amanda had gone. The search began immediately. Family members walked streets carrying flashlights. Volunteers distributed missing posters. Police interviewed co-workers. Television stations showed Amanda's smiling school photograph again and again. Her mother never stopped believing. Each time the telephone rang unexpectedly, hope returned for a few seconds. Every unidentified young woman reported somewhere in the country became another possibility. Every rumor became another reason to keep searching. Years passed without answers. But Luana refused to surrender. Even when others quietly accepted that Amanda might never come home, she continued believing her daughter was alive. That faith came at an enormous emotional cost. She spent birthdays wondering where Amanda was. She imagined holidays with an empty chair. She waited for footsteps that never came. In 2006, after years of emotional exhaustion and declining health, Luana died. She never learned that Amanda had survived. She never learned that her daughter had remained only a few miles away. It is one of the cruelest realities of the entire case. A mother died still searching. A daughter survived without knowing that her mother would never see her again. Inside the house, Amanda had no way of saying goodbye. Then there was Gina de Jesus. Only 14 years old. Still a child. She had a gentle personality that made people feel comfortable around her. She loved spending time with friends. She enjoyed school. Her family described her as caring, respectful, and deeply connected to those she loved. Unlike Michelle and Amanda, Gina unknowingly shared a connection with Ariel Castro. She knew his daughter. She had spent time around the family. She recognized him as someone familiar. That familiarity destroyed the natural instinct many children have to avoid strangers. When children are taught about danger, they often learn to fear unfamiliar faces. But danger sometimes wears the face of someone already known. On April 2, 2004, Gina walked home from school. It was a route she had traveled many times before. Students laughed together. Backpacks bounced against shoulders. The afternoon looked completely ordinary. Somewhere along that journey, Ariel Castro offered her a ride. To Gina, it was not a frightening moment. It probably felt like an act of kindness from an adult she recognized. She accepted. It became the last free decision she made for many years. Her disappearance terrified the community. Parents looked at their own children differently after Gina vanished. Walking home from school no longer felt completely safe. Families organized neighborhood searches. Schools reminded students to stay together. Flyers appeared on bulletin boards, telephone poles, storefront windows, and church entrances. Everywhere people looked, 3 smiling faces stared back. Michelle, Amanda, Gina. 3 missing young women. 3 unanswered mysteries. As the years passed, something remarkable happened inside the Seymour Avenue house. Despite everything Ariel Castro did to isolate them, the women slowly found ways to support one another. He tried to control every aspect of their lives. He separated them. He punished communication. He wanted each victim to believe she was completely alone. Isolation strengthens control. When people lose meaningful human connection, fear becomes easier to maintain. But human beings possess an extraordinary ability to create hope, even in impossible situations. Whenever opportunities appeared, the women quietly encouraged each other. A whispered conversation. A brief exchange through a doorway. A reassuring glance. Sometimes survival begins with something as small as another person saying, "You're not alone." Michelle, the first captive, eventually became a source of strength for Amanda and Gina despite enduring unimaginable suffering herself. She understood the routines. She understood Castro's moods. She understood which moments were most dangerous. That knowledge helped the others survive. Years later, both Amanda and Gina would acknowledge Michelle's courage during captivity. One of the most extraordinary examples came when Amanda gave birth inside the house. There was no hospital. No doctor. No ambulance. Only terror. Castro ordered Michelle to assist with the delivery while threatening to kill her if anything happened to the baby. The situation was almost impossible. Michelle had no medical training. Only determination. Against overwhelming odds, she helped bring a little girl safely into the world. In the middle of unimaginable darkness, life somehow continued. That child became another reason the women refused to give up. Protecting her became a shared responsibility. She represented innocence inside a place built upon cruelty. As the little girl grew older, she experienced a world unlike any other child. Her universe consisted almost entirely of the rooms inside the house. She laughed. She played. She learned words. Yet the outside world remained almost entirely beyond her understanding. The women did everything they could to preserve some sense of childhood for her despite their own suffering. Even in captivity, compassion survived. Years of abuse could not completely destroy their humanity. Looking back, it is tempting to define Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Gina De Jesus only by what happened inside that house. But doing so overlooks something essential. Their identities were never created by Ariel Castro. He stole years of their lives. He inflicted unimaginable trauma. But he did not define who they were. Michelle remained a fighter. Amanda remained hopeful. Gina remained gentle. Those qualities existed long before captivity. And somehow, despite nearly 11 years of imprisonment, they survived. Not because they were fearless. Not because they were unbreakable. But because, even in the darkest place imaginable, each found reasons to believe that tomorrow might be the day someone finally opened the door. On the morning of August 23, 2002, Michelle Knight woke up believing it would be another difficult, but ordinary day. She could not have known that before the sun set over Cleveland, her entire world would be taken away from her. At 21 years old, Michelle was already familiar with struggle. Her life had never followed an easy path. She carried the responsibilities of a young mother, the pressure of personal battles, and the constant desire to create a better future for herself and her son. She was not searching for adventure. She was not looking for danger. She was simply trying to move forward. That day, Michelle had somewhere she needed to go. She was dealing with a matter involving her son and custody arrangements. Like many people facing difficult moments in their lives, she was focused on solving problems, not imagining that a stranger would soon change everything. The streets of Cleveland looked normal. Cars moved through intersections. People walked along sidewalks. Businesses opened for the day. Neighbors continued their routines. Nothing about the morning suggested that a tragedy was beginning. Michelle walked through the city unaware that someone was watching. Ariel Castro had already been living a double life. To the outside world, he was a familiar neighborhood figure. He drove a school bus. He knew the streets. He knew the routines of the area. He understood how to appear ordinary. But behind that ordinary appearance was someone who had been developing a pattern of manipulation and control. When Castro encountered Michelle, he recognized vulnerability. He saw someone who was alone. Someone who might accept an offer that appeared harmless. According to Michelle's later account, Castro approached her and offered her a ride. At that moment, the situation did not immediately feel threatening. A ride from someone familiar with the neighborhood could appear like a simple act of kindness. A few minutes. A short distance. A normal interaction. But the moment Michelle entered Castro's vehicle, she unknowingly stepped into a trap. The journey that began like an ordinary car ride would become the beginning of one of the longest captivity cases in American history. Instead of taking her where she needed to go, Castro drove her to his home on Seymour Avenue. A house that looked ordinary from the outside. A house that would become a prison. When Michelle entered the property, she was no longer dealing with a misunderstanding. The reality changed instantly. The friendly image disappeared. The person she thought she could trust revealed another side. Inside the house, Castro attacked her. Fear replaced confusion. The world Michelle knew disappeared in a matter of moments. She was restrained. She was prevented from leaving. She was told that escape was impossible. One of the most powerful weapons Castro used was not only physical force, but psychological terror. He wanted his victims to believe that resistance was useless. He wanted them to believe that nobody was coming. He wanted them to believe that the outside world had forgotten them. For Michelle, the first hours inside the house were filled with disbelief. The human mind often struggles to process sudden trauma. A person can understand danger intellectually, while still feeling as though the situation cannot possibly be real. Questions race through the mind. Why is this happening? How can I get away? Will someone find me? Will anyone know where I am? Michelle had no answers. She only knew that the door had closed behind her. And she was trapped. The house itself became a carefully controlled environment. Castro did not simply lock someone inside and hope they would stay. He created a system designed to maintain power. Doors were secured. Windows were blocked. Movement was restricted. Fear became part of the architecture. Every room carried the message that Castro controlled everything. The outside world was physically close. Neighbors lived nearby. Cars passed on the street. People walked within a short distance. Yet Michelle was separated from them by walls that felt impossible to break. The cruelty of the situation was that freedom existed only a few feet away. She could not reach it. She could not call for help. She could not make anyone understand. In the days following Michelle's disappearance, her family searched. They asked questions. They wanted answers. But outside the house, the investigation faced uncertainty. Michelle was an adult. She had personal struggles. Authorities considered different possibilities. The possibility that she had left voluntarily became part of the early assumptions. For someone trapped inside a house against her will, this misunderstanding created another layer of suffering. The world was looking for a person who had disappeared. But Michelle needed the world to understand that she had been taken. That difference mattered. Because time was passing. And inside Seymour Avenue, every day strengthened Castro's control. Nearly 8 months after Michelle disappeared, Ariel Castro committed another crime. This time, the victim was Amanda Berry. April 21, 2003, began as a normal day for 16-year-old Amanda. She worked her shift at Burger King. She spoke with co-workers. She prepared to return home. Teenagers often imagine their futures in simple ways. Graduation. Friends. Relationships. Careers. The small dreams that make life exciting. Amanda had no reason to believe that an ordinary walk home would become the final moment of her freedom. After finishing work, she contacted her family. She told them she was heading home. Those were the last normal words they would hear from her for 10 years. Somewhere during her journey, Ariel Castro encountered her. Again, he used familiarity and deception. He did not appear as a stranger. He did not appear as a threat. He appeared as someone who could be trusted. Amanda entered the vehicle. Like Michelle before her, she was taken to the Seymour Avenue house. When she entered a nightmare that already existed. She was not the first victim. She would not be the last. Inside that house, Amanda discovered that Michelle was alive. But instead of finding comfort, she found another person trapped in the same terrifying situation. The presence of another victim created a complicated reality. On one hand, she was no longer completely alone. On the other hand, the existence of another captive revealed something even more frightening. This was not an accident. This was a pattern. Ariel Castro had done this before. And he could do it again. Amanda was only 16 years old. She was still growing. Still learning about the world. Still discovering who she wanted to become. Suddenly, the future she imagined disappeared. Her family searched desperately. They distributed photographs. They contacted authorities. They waited for phone calls. But inside the house, Amanda's life became controlled by someone else. A year later, another girl disappeared. 14-year-old Gina De Jesus. By this point, Castro had already learned how to maintain secrecy. He knew how to manipulate fear. He knew how to create the illusion that nobody would discover what happened inside his home. Gina was especially vulnerable because of her age. She was a child. She knew Castro through his daughter. There was a connection that made his approach appear safe. That familiarity became a weapon. On the day Gina disappeared, nobody around her could have imagined the danger waiting nearby. For her family, the disappearance created immediate panic. A child had vanished. A community searched. Questions multiplied. Where was she? Who had taken her? Was she still alive? Those questions would remain unanswered for nearly 9 years. Inside the Seymour Avenue house, 3 different worlds collided. Michelle, Amanda, and Gina were forced into a reality where survival depended on understanding their captor. Castro established rules. Breaking those rules brought punishment. Obeying them brought only temporary relief. This cycle became central to long-term captivity. Victims are not simply physically trapped. They are placed into a psychological battle where every decision carries risk. The women had to think carefully. When to speak. When to remain silent. When to ask for something. When to avoid attention. They were forced to study Castro's behavior, because understanding him could mean survival. They learned his moods. They recognized warning signs. They adapted. Adaptation was not acceptance. Survival was not surrender. It was the human mind finding a way to continue existing in impossible circumstances. Over the years, Castro's control became more extreme. The victims were isolated from the outside world. They were denied normal communication. They had no access to newspapers, television reports about their own disappearances, or the ability to tell anyone where they were. The cruel irony was overwhelming. The world was searching for them. Their families were calling their names. Their photographs were circulating. But they were trapped only a few miles away. The house that held them was surrounded by life. Yet nobody knew. Ariel Castro continued walking outside. He continued interacting with neighbors. He continued appearing ordinary. Every day he maintained the illusion. Every day the victims waited. Time became their greatest enemy. A teenager became an adult inside captivity. A young woman lost years of her life. A child was born into a world that should never have existed. But even after everything Castro tried to take from them, something remained. They remained alive. They remained human. They remained capable of hope. And one day, after nearly 11 years, the door that had closed on Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Gina De Jesus would finally open again. But before that moment arrived, they would have to endure years of darkness inside the house that the world would later call the Cleveland Horror House. For almost 11 years, the house on Seymour Avenue stood quietly among its neighbors. The seasons changed around it. Snow covered the sidewalks during Cleveland winters. Spring brought rain and the first signs of new life. Summer evenings filled the streets with the sounds of children playing outside. Autumn leaves covered the lawns before being swept away. The neighborhood continued living. People went to work. Children grew older. Families celebrated birthdays and holidays. And behind the walls of 2207 Seymour Avenue, 3 women waited for a moment that seemed impossible. A moment when the outside world would finally hear them. 4 years, the disappearances of Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Gina De Jesus remained unresolved mysteries. Their names appeared in missing person reports. Their faces were shown on television. Their families carried their photographs and memories while searching for answers that never came. But by 2013, many years had passed. The cases had become painful reminders of uncertainty. The families had experienced something that many describe as a living nightmare, not knowing whether someone they loved was alive or gone forever. For the families of missing people, there is a unique kind of suffering. Death brings grief, but uncertainty creates endless questions. There is no final goodbye. No moment of closure. Every unexpected phone call can bring hope. Every knock on the door can create fear. Every unidentified person reported in another city can reopen old wounds. For Amanda Berry's family, that uncertainty lasted nearly 10 years. For Gina De Jesus' family, nearly 9 years. For Michelle Knight's family, almost 11 years. Nobody knew that the answer was sitting quietly behind an ordinary door. Nobody knew that the women they had searched for were still alive. Nobody knew that the man living inside that house had been hiding one of the most disturbing crimes in American history. Then came May 6, 2013. It began like any other day. The streets of Cleveland were moving at their normal pace. Cars passed through neighborhoods. People went to work. Neighbors followed their routines. But inside 2207 Seymour Avenue, something changed. A small mistake created a moment of opportunity. For years, Ariel Castro had maintained complete control over the house. The victims lived according to his rules. The doors remained secured. The outside world remained unreachable. But that day, the control that had lasted almost 11 years finally weakened. Castro left the house. And somehow, the front door was not secured the way it normally was. For most people, an unlocked door would mean almost nothing. For someone who had spent years trapped inside, it meant everything. Amanda Berry saw an opening. A possibility. A chance that might never come again. The decision she made in those moments required incredible courage. After years of fear, threats, and psychological control, she moved toward freedom. She did not know exactly what would happen. She did not know if Castro would return. She did not know if someone would believe her. But she knew one thing. She had to try. Amanda approached the door. The barrier that had separated her from the world for nearly a decade was suddenly no longer impossible. She pushed. She forced it open enough to create space. And then she screamed. Not a quiet request. Not a hesitant call. A desperate cry from someone who had been waiting years to be heard. The sound reached the outside world. A neighbor named Charles Ramsey was nearby. He was eating his lunch when he heard a woman screaming. At first, like anyone hearing something unexpected, he tried to understand what was happening. The voice sounded urgent. Different. It was not an argument between neighbors. It was not a normal disturbance. Something was wrong. Ramsey approached the house. What he saw was a scene that would later become known across the world. A woman standing near the doorway. A child. Panic. Fear. And a story that seemed impossible. Amanda told him that she had been kidnapped. She told him she had been inside the house for years. She told him she needed help. For Ramsey, the information was almost impossible to process. The woman standing in front of him was not a stranger who needed a ride home. She was someone whose face had appeared on missing person posters for nearly a decade. She was Amanda Berry. The girl Cleveland had been searching for. The teenager who disappeared in 2003. She was alive. The moment was overwhelming. Ramsey helped Amanda escape the immediate danger. Amanda carried her young daughter outside. A child born inside captivity. A child who had never experienced the world beyond those walls. Amanda then called emergency services. Her voice was filled with emotion. She was trying to explain something that sounded unbelievable. She gave her name. She explained that she had been kidnapped. She said she was finally free. The call quickly became one of the most significant emergency calls in modern American criminal history. Within minutes, police officers rushed toward Seymour Avenue. They arrived expecting a possible kidnapping situation. But they did not yet understand the scale of what they were about to uncover. When officers entered the house, they found Michelle Knight. Then they found Gina De Jesus. 2 more women. 2 more survivors. The impossible became reality. 3 missing women, who had vanished years earlier, were alive. The city that had searched for them finally found them. But the discovery also revealed something far darker. The house was not simply a place where 3 people had been hiding. It was a crime scene. A place containing evidence of years of abuse, control, and suffering. Investigators immediately began securing the property. The home that had appeared ordinary from the outside suddenly became the center of one of the largest criminal investigations in Ohio history. Police officers walked through rooms where victims had spent years trapped. Every detail became important. Every object could potentially explain how the crimes occurred. The investigators faced a difficult reality. They were not investigating a single event. They were investigating nearly 11 years of captivity. Every room represented a chapter. Every locked door represented time stolen from the victims. The discovery shocked Cleveland. People who lived near Seymour Avenue struggled to understand how something like this could happen so close to them. The questions came quickly. How could 3 women disappear and remain hidden for so long? How could a criminal operate inside a neighborhood without being discovered? How could a house surrounded by other homes become a prison? The answers would reveal the disturbing power of secrecy and manipulation. Ariel Castro had relied on more than physical barriers. He relied on fear. He relied on threats. He relied on the belief that his victims had no way out. But on May 6, 2013, that belief collapsed. The first person to break free was Amanda Berry. But her escape opened the path for everyone else. Michelle Knight was finally found. After almost 11 years, the world learned that she had survived. Gina de Jesus was found. After nearly 9 years, her family received the news they had prayed for. The emotions surrounding the reunions were impossible to describe. Families who had prepared themselves for the worst suddenly faced the reality they had almost stopped imagining. Their loved ones were alive. But they were also changed by what they had endured. Freedom did not erase the years they lost. It did not remove the trauma. It did not return the birthdays, holidays, and ordinary moments stolen from them. But freedom gave them something they had been denied for years. A future. As news spread, cameras surrounded Seymour Avenue. Reporters arrived from across the country. The world wanted answers. People wanted to understand how such a crime could remain hidden. Neighbors described their shock. Many struggled with feelings of disbelief. The house they had passed countless times was now a symbol of horror. The ordinary street became internationally known. A place where 3 women had survived unimaginable circumstances. The investigation moved quickly. Authorities arrested Ariel Castro the same day. His brothers were also questioned during the early stages of the investigation, though investigators later determined they were not involved in the crimes. The focus remained on Ariel Castro. The man who had appeared ordinary. The man who had lived among neighbors. The man who had hidden a nightmare behind a normal-looking home. As investigators began examining the evidence, the full scale of the crimes became clearer. They discovered a carefully maintained system of captivity. A house transformed into a prison. A pattern that had lasted years. The discovery was not only about finding 3 missing women. It was about understanding how those women survived. It was about understanding how one person could maintain such control for so long. And it was about confronting a terrifying question that would haunt Cleveland and the entire nation. How could a house hiding 3 prisoners exist unnoticed for nearly 11 years? The answer would come through the investigation. But before justice could begin, investigators first had to uncover everything that had happened inside those walls. Because the door had finally opened. And behind it was a story of survival, cruelty, and courage that the world would never forget. The morning after the discovery on Seymour Avenue, Cleveland was no longer looking for 3 missing girls. The city was trying to understand how 3 women could have been alive, hidden, and imprisoned for nearly 11 years in a house that stood in the middle of an ordinary neighborhood. The question seemed impossible. How could something so terrible exist without anyone knowing? How could a man drive a school bus, walk through the streets, talk to neighbors, and live a seemingly normal life while hiding one of the darkest secrets in modern American history? The investigation that followed would attempt to answer those questions. But before detectives could understand the crimes, they first had to understand the house. The house at 2207 Seymour Avenue became the center of the investigation, almost immediately. Behind the front door that had remained closed for so many years, was a world investigators had never expected to find. It was not simply a location where crimes had occurred. It was a place where time had been stolen. Every room contained evidence of a hidden existence. The investigators entering the property faced a difficult task. They were not walking into the aftermath of a single violent incident. They were entering the remains of almost 11 years of captivity. Every object had potential meaning. Every locked area raised new questions. Every detail could reveal how Ariel Castro maintained control. The first priority was protecting the survivors. Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Gina De Jesus had finally escaped, but they had just experienced a massive psychological and emotional shock. They had spent years adapting to life inside that house. Suddenly, they were surrounded by strangers. Police officers, medical workers, investigators, reporters. The world they had been separated from for so long had returned all at once. For anyone who has experienced long-term captivity, freedom does not arrive as a simple moment of happiness. It can also be overwhelming. The victims had to process thousands of emotions at the same time. Relief, fear, confusion, grief for the years they lost. The outside world celebrated their rescue. But for the survivors, the journey of healing had only begun. Meanwhile, investigators began collecting evidence. The house was carefully searched from top to bottom. Detectives photographed rooms, collected physical evidence, documented conditions inside the property. They examined doors, windows, locks, and areas where the victims had been kept. The investigation needed to reconstruct years of events from fragments. There were no cameras recording the crimes. No public witnesses. No simple timeline. The evidence had to tell the story. And the story was horrifying. Investigators discovered that Castro had created an environment designed around isolation and control. The women had been prevented from leaving. The windows had been blocked. The doors had been secured. The outside world had been made almost unreachable. The house was not a temporary hiding place. It was a carefully maintained prison. As investigators examined the property, they also began studying Ariel Castro himself. Who was this man? How had he managed to commit these crimes for so long? What allowed him to maintain the appearance of an ordinary neighbor? The contrast between his public and private lives became one of the most disturbing aspects of the case. To neighbors, Ariel Castro was a familiar figure. He was someone who smiled. Someone who talked casually. Someone who appeared involved in the community. He played music. He hosted gatherings. He worked as a school bus driver. People struggled to reconcile that image with the crimes uncovered inside his home. The investigation revealed that Castro was not simply someone who suddenly committed a terrible act. There were warning signs from his past. Years earlier, allegations of domestic violence had been made against him. His former partner had accused him of abusive behavior. Those incidents provided investigators with important information about patterns of control and aggression. But they had not revealed the full extent of what was happening. The investigation also focused on how Castro selected his victims. Detectives noticed a disturbing pattern. Each victim was vulnerable in a different way. Michelle was an adult dealing with personal difficulties. Amanda was a teenager trying to find her way home. Gina was a young girl who trusted someone she already knew. Castro did not rely only on physical force. He relied on opportunity. He relied on trust. He relied on the fact that people often do not expect danger from someone familiar. As detectives interviewed the survivors, they began reconstructing the timeline. They learned how Michelle was taken in 2002. How Amanda disappeared in 2003. How Gina vanished in 2004. They learned about the years that followed. The restrictions. The threats. The psychological manipulation. The moments when the victims believed they might never escape. Each interview provided another piece of the puzzle. But investigators had to approach those conversations carefully. Trauma does not always produce a simple timeline. Memories formed under extreme stress can be complicated. Survivors may remember certain moments clearly while other details become blurred. The goal was not only collecting evidence. It was understanding what the women had endured. The investigators also had to determine whether anyone else had participated in the crimes. When news of the discovery broke, many people immediately wondered whether Ariel Castro had acted alone. Could someone else have known? Could someone else have helped? Could such a secret really exist without assistance? Those questions led authorities to examine every possible connection. Castro's family members were questioned. His brothers were investigated. The police needed to be certain that no accomplices existed. Ultimately, investigators determined that Ariel Castro was responsible for the crimes. His brothers were not charged in connection with the kidnappings. The investigation continued to focus entirely on him. Another major question remained. Why had the women not escaped earlier? This became one of the most misunderstood aspects of the case. Many people, who had never experienced captivity, wondered why the victims did not simply run away. But investigators and psychological experts understood that captivity is not only about locked doors. It is about control. Castro had spent years creating fear. He convinced the women that escape would result in death. He threatened their families. He controlled their access to basic needs. He created an environment where every choice carried danger. Long-term captivity changes how people think. Survival becomes the priority. The victims were not living normal lives where they could simply walk out and ask for help. They were surviving a system designed to make escape feel impossible. The investigation also examined the birth of Amanda Berry's daughter. The child became one of the most emotional aspects of the case. She was born inside the house. She had spent the first years of her life in an environment created by her mother's captor. Authorities needed to protect her privacy while also investigating the circumstances surrounding her birth. DNA testing later confirmed Ariel Castro was the biological father. The discovery added another layer of tragedy to an already devastating case. While investigators worked inside the house, Cleveland watched. The city wanted answers. People gathered near Seymour Avenue. Some left flowers. Others stood silently, trying to understand how the unimaginable had happened in their community. The media coverage became enormous. News organizations from around the world followed every development. The faces of Michelle, Amanda, and Gina were no longer images on missing posters. They were now symbols of survival. But with the attention came difficult conversations. People questioned law enforcement. They questioned whether more could have been done during the years the women were missing. They questioned how Castro had avoided detection. Those questions would continue long after the investigation ended. One area of focus was whether authorities had missed opportunities. There had been reports and suspicions over the years. Neighbors later described moments that seemed unusual. Some remembered seeing strange behavior around the house. Others wondered whether certain warning signs had been ignored. However, investigators also recognized the difficulty of solving a crime with no obvious evidence. The victims were hidden. The house gave no clear outward indication of what was happening inside. Ariel Castro had created a secret world behind ordinary walls. The investigation moved rapidly toward prosecution. The evidence was overwhelming. The victims' accounts. The physical evidence from the house. The medical examinations. The forensic findings. Everything pointed toward one conclusion. Ariel Castro had committed years of unimaginable crimes. But before justice could be delivered, prosecutors faced a difficult decision. How should they proceed? A case involving hundreds of charges, multiple victims, and years of abuse could become one of the most complex trials in Ohio history. A trial would require the survivors to revisit painful experiences in public. They might have to sit in a courtroom and face the man who controlled their lives for years. For prosecutors, justice was not only about punishment. It was also about protecting the survivors. As the investigation continued, one thing became clear. The house on Seymour Avenue had revealed its secrets. The missing girls had been found. The hidden prison had been exposed. But the full story of what happened inside those walls was only beginning to emerge. And now, the focus turned toward the man who built that prison. Ariel Castro was no longer the quiet neighbor. No longer the school bus driver. No longer the familiar face on the street. He was the man accused of one of the most shocking crimes America had ever seen. And soon, he would have to answer for everything that happened behind the locked doors of 2207 Seymour Avenue. For nearly 11 years, the story of Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Gina De Jesus existed in silence. Their families searched. Investigators followed leads. Communities hoped. But inside the house on Seymour Avenue, 3 women lived through a nightmare that nobody knew was still happening. The breakthrough did not come from a dramatic police operation. There was no massive raid. No secret surveillance mission. No detective discovering a hidden underground room. Instead, it came from a single moment of courage. A moment when one woman decided that she could no longer wait. May 6, 2013, began like an ordinary day in Cleveland. The city had no idea that before sunset, a mystery that had lasted almost a decade would finally be solved. For years, Ariel Castro had controlled every aspect of life inside his house. He controlled movement. He controlled information. He controlled fear. His greatest weapon was the belief that escape was impossible. But every system of control has a weakness. And on that day, the weakness was a door. For years, the women had watched the outside world through limited opportunities. They heard sounds from beyond the walls. Cars passing. Neighbors talking. Life continuing. They knew freedom existed nearby. They just could not reach it. But when Amanda Berry noticed that the front door was not secured in the usual way, something changed. It was not simply an open doorway. It was a decision. After years of being told that escape would never happen, Amanda had to overcome the psychological barriers created by her captivity. Fear does not disappear simply because an opportunity appears. A person who has been threatened repeatedly may still hesitate. The mind remembers danger. The body remembers punishment. For Amanda, those seconds at the doorway represented a battle between years of fear and one moment of hope. She chose hope. She moved. She pushed toward the outside. And then she screamed. Her voice carried everything she had been unable to say for almost 10 years. It was the voice of a missing teenager who had become a woman while imprisoned. It was the voice of a mother fighting for her child. It was the voice of someone demanding to be seen. The sound reached the street. And for the first time in years, someone outside the house heard her. That person was Charles Ramsey. Ramsey was not a police officer. He was not an investigator. He was simply a neighbor who happened to be nearby. He heard something unusual and went toward the house. What he saw would change his life forever. Standing there was a woman he did not recognize at first. She was frightened. She was desperate. She was holding a young child. She told him something that seemed impossible. She said she had been kidnapped. She said she had been trapped inside the house. She said her name was Amanda Berry. Ramsey immediately realized the seriousness of the situation. He helped her get away from the doorway and toward safety. Amanda had escaped. But she knew there were others still inside. She knew Michelle was still trapped. She knew Gina was still trapped. The first thing she did after reaching freedom was not simply celebrate her own escape. She fought for the others. That moment revealed something important about Amanda. After everything she had endured, her compassion remained. She had spent years being controlled by someone who wanted to isolate her. But isolation had not destroyed her connection to other people. She still cared. She still remembered. She still wanted them to be free too. When police arrived, the scene became one of disbelief. Officers responding to a possible kidnapping discovered something much larger. Inside the house were two more missing women. Michelle Knight. Gina de Jesus. The names that had appeared on missing posters for years were suddenly connected to the same location. The impossible became reality. The missing women had not vanished forever. They had been alive all along. The news spread rapidly through Cleveland. At first, many people struggled to understand what they were hearing. 3 women missing for years had been found alive in one house. It sounded like something from a movie. But this was not fiction. This was real. And the address was real. 2207 Seymour Avenue. The house that had blended into the neighborhood for so long was now the center of international attention. Police immediately began securing the property. The investigation changed from a missing person case into a massive criminal investigation. The first hours after the rescue were critical. Investigators needed to protect evidence. Medical professionals needed to care for the survivors. Authorities needed to determine whether there were additional victims. The situation was changing minute by minute. Meanwhile, the families of the missing women received the news they had waited years to hear. For some, the phone call was almost impossible to process. A loved one they feared was gone was alive. But the joy was mixed with painful reality. The women had survived. But they had also suffered. Their families had to understand that returning home would not mean returning to the past. The years lost could never be recovered. Amanda was no longer the 16-year-old girl who disappeared after work. Gina was no longer the 14-year-old child who walked home from school. Michelle was no longer the 21-year-old young mother who left for an appointment. They had all changed. Time had continued without them. The reunions became some of the most emotional moments connected to the case. Families embraced survivors they had spent years imagining they might never see again. Tears replaced uncertainty. Questions replaced silence. But behind the emotional celebrations was the reality that healing would take time. The rescue was only the beginning. Ariel Castro was arrested later that day. For years, he had moved through the neighborhood without suspicion. Now he was suddenly the center of a national criminal investigation. Authorities examined his background. They searched his home. They reviewed years of information. They wanted to understand how the crimes had remained hidden. One of the most troubling aspects of the case was how ordinary Castro appeared. People who knew him described someone who did not seem dangerous. He was a person who greeted neighbors. A person who attended community events. A person who appeared to live a normal life. That contrast became one of the central questions after the rescue. How could someone commit such crimes while maintaining a normal public identity? The answer revealed an uncomfortable truth about human behavior. People often judge danger by appearance. They expect criminals to look threatening. They expect evil to announce itself. But many offenders survive by appearing ordinary. They become part of everyday life. They create trust. They use familiarity as protection. Ariel Castro had done exactly that. The discovery also raised questions about missed opportunities. Over the years, neighbors, police, and authorities had received information connected to unusual events around the house. People wondered whether more could have been done. Whether someone should have looked closer. Whether the victims could have been found sooner. These questions became part of the national conversation. But at the center of everything were the survivors. Their voices. Their experiences. Their strength. The world wanted details about what happened inside the house. But the women were not only victims of a crime. They were survivors who had fought through unimaginable circumstances. Michelle Knight especially became a symbol of endurance. She had been the first victim. She had spent the longest time trapped. She had endured years of isolation before the others arrived. Yet she survived. Amanda Berry became known as the woman whose courage opened the door. Her decision changed everything. Gina de Jesus represented the childhood that had been stolen, but also the hope of recovery. Together, their stories showed something powerful. Survival does not always look dramatic. Sometimes survival means waking up another day. Sometimes it means protecting another person. Sometimes it means believing that someday, the locked door will open. The breakthrough on May 6, 2013, did not erase the pain of the past. It did not return the years stolen from them. But it changed the direction of their lives. After nearly 11 years, the world finally knew the truth. The women who had disappeared were alive. The house that had hidden them was exposed. And the man responsible would soon face justice. But before the courtroom battles began, investigators still had to uncover every detail of what happened inside 2207 Seymour Avenue. They had found the survivors. Now they had to prove the crimes. And the evidence waiting inside that house would reveal the full scale of Ariel Castro's actions. On the afternoon of May 6, 2013, the front door of 2207 Seymour Avenue finally opened. By sunset, Ariel Castro was sitting in police custody. For nearly 11 years, he had controlled every aspect of three women's lives. He had decided when they ate, when they slept, when they could move, and whether they would ever see daylight again. Now, for the first time in years, the balance of power had changed. The man who had built a prison inside his home was no longer in control. Instead, he sat inside an interrogation room, surrounded not by locked doors of his own making, but by detectives determined to uncover the truth. Outside, the news spread across Cleveland with astonishing speed. Television stations interrupted regular programming. National news networks switched to live coverage. Within hours, the story had become international. 3 women, who had been missing for years, had been found alive. Reporters gathered outside the Seymour Avenue house. Cameras pointed toward the weathered front porch that had hidden unimaginable suffering. Neighbors stood quietly behind police tape, many struggling to believe what investigators had just uncovered. Some stared silently at the house they had passed every day. Others cried. Many repeated the same sentence to journalists. "We had no idea." Those 4 words echoed throughout the neighborhood. No one had imagined that ordinary-looking home concealed one of the most horrifying captivity cases in American history. While the media focused on the rescue, prosecutors immediately began preparing what would become one of the largest criminal cases in Ohio's recent history. The evidence was overwhelming. Investigators had the testimony of 3 survivors. They had physical evidence collected from inside the house. They had medical examinations documenting years of abuse. They had forensic evidence connecting Ariel Castro directly to the crimes. Every new piece strengthened the case. Within days, prosecutors announced an extraordinary list of criminal charges. The numbers alone shocked the public. Hundreds of criminal counts. Kidnapping, rape, felonious assault, aggravated murder charges related to the forced termination of pregnancies. Additional charges connected to years of unlawful imprisonment and violence. The indictment eventually grew to 977 counts, reflecting nearly every documented criminal act investigators were able to establish over the years of captivity. Each number represented more than paperwork. Each charge represented another act of violence. Another stolen day. Another crime committed against women, who had already endured more than most people could imagine. As legal preparations continued, the survivors faced another difficult reality. Their rescue had ended the captivity. It had not ended the trauma. For nearly a decade, their world had consisted of a handful of rooms, locked doors, fear, and uncertainty. Now they suddenly found themselves surrounded by doctors, counselors, investigators, attorneys, and reporters. Every conversation required them to revisit memories they had spent years trying simply to survive. Trauma specialists worked carefully with each woman. Healing from prolonged captivity is not measured in weeks or months. It often takes years. The physical injuries may heal faster than the psychological wounds. Simple everyday experiences can become overwhelming. Walking outside freely. Sleeping without fear. Making personal decisions. Even silence could feel unfamiliar after years of living under constant threat. The women also faced enormous public attention. The entire country wanted to hear their stories. Television producers requested interviews. Publishers offered book deals. News organizations competed for exclusive information. But prosecutors understood that protecting the survivors remained the highest priority. Every unnecessary public appearance risked reopening emotional wounds. At the center of the legal process stood Ariel Castro. Unlike the frightened women he had controlled for years, Castro now appeared in court wearing jail clothing, surrounded by deputies. The image was striking. The man who once exercised absolute power over 3 lives now waited for judges to determine his own future. His first court appearances attracted enormous attention. Courtrooms filled with reporters. Outside, satellite trucks lined nearby streets. People wanted to see the man whose face had become associated with one of the nation's most disturbing crimes. Many expected a dramatic defense. Some wondered whether Castro would deny everything. Others expected years of courtroom battles. Instead, prosecutors quietly built a case so strong that the evidence left little room for uncertainty. The testimony of the survivors was supported by physical evidence. The condition of the house. The restraints. The forensic findings. Medical records. DNA evidence. Together they created an overwhelming picture of what had happened inside Seymour Avenue. Among the most heartbreaking evidence were the accounts involving Michelle Knight. She described repeated pregnancies during captivity and the violence that caused her to lose them. Those allegations formed the basis for some of the most serious charges prosecutors intended to pursue. Her testimony revealed not only physical cruelty, but deliberate efforts to maintain complete domination over her body and her future. Another deeply emotional part of the case involved Amanda Berry's daughter. DNA testing confirmed what investigators already suspected. Ariel Castro was the biological father. The child, innocent in every sense, had spent the early years of her life inside the only world she had ever known. Prosecutors handled every aspect involving the child with extraordinary care, recognizing that protecting her identity and future was essential. As the legal process continued, prosecutors faced an important decision. They possessed enough evidence to pursue the death penalty. Ohio law allowed capital punishment under certain circumstances, and many believed Castro deserved nothing less. But capital cases often require years of appeals. Lengthy trials. Repeated hearings. Most importantly, they frequently require survivors to testify in painful detail over and over again. The prosecution had to ask itself a difficult question. What outcome best served justice? Was justice measured only by the harshest possible punishment? Or was it also measured by protecting the women from reliving years of unimaginable suffering inside a courtroom? Eventually, negotiations began. Castro agreed to plead guilty. The agreement eliminated the possibility of a death sentence. In return, he admitted responsibility for hundreds of crimes and accepted that he would spend the rest of his life in prison without any possibility of parole. For the survivors, the plea carried enormous significance. They would not have to endure a prolonged public trial. They would not have to face aggressive cross-examinations questioning every painful memory. The legal process could move toward a conclusion without forcing them to repeatedly relive the darkest years of their lives. On August 1, 2013, Ariel Castro entered the courtroom and formally admitted guilt. One after another, the charges were acknowledged. The sheer number reflected the unimaginable scale of his crimes. Each admission represented another piece of truth finally spoken aloud. Then came sentencing. The courtroom was filled with tension. Families, attorneys, reporters, court personnel. Everyone understood they were witnessing the conclusion of one of the most significant criminal cases in Ohio history. Before imposing sentence, the judge addressed Castro directly. The remarks reflected not only the legal gravity of the case, but the extraordinary suffering endured by the victims. Castro also spoke. At times he attempted to portray himself as someone driven by addiction and personal problems. He insisted he was not a monster. But for many listening inside the courtroom, those explanations could never outweigh nearly 11 years of calculated imprisonment, repeated violence, and systematic abuse. Actions speak louder than words. And Ariel Castro's actions had already defined him. The sentence was extraordinary. Life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Plus 1,000 additional years. The additional years carried symbolic importance. They represented the countless acts committed over nearly 11 years. The court intended to ensure that Ariel Castro would never again walk free. As the sentence was announced, many observers described a sense of relief. Not celebration. Relief. Justice cannot erase trauma. It cannot restore stolen birthdays. It cannot return childhoods, family memories, or years spent behind locked doors. But justice can establish accountability. It can affirm publicly that what happened was real. That the victims were believed. That the crimes mattered. For Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Gina De Jesus, the sentence marked the end of one chapter. Not the end of healing. That journey would continue for many years. But the man who had controlled their lives would never control another day of their future. The courtroom doors eventually closed. Outside, reporters summarized the sentence for audiences around the world. Inside, 3 survivors quietly stepped away from the legal process that had finally named the crimes committed against them. Their lives would never be the same. But for the first time in almost 11 years, every tomorrow belonged to them. When the courtroom doors closed after Ariel Castro's sentencing, many people believed the story had reached its ending. The man responsible would spend the rest of his life behind bars. The 3 women were free. Justice had been served. From a legal perspective, that was true. From a human perspective, however, the hardest journey was only beginning. For nearly 11 years, Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Gina De Jesus had lived inside a world where every decision belonged to someone else. Freedom returned in a single afternoon. Recovery would take years. The public often imagines rescue as the final chapter in stories of survival. Movies usually end when the victims escape. The audience leaves believing that everything will eventually be all right. Real life is different. Real life begins after the rescue. The women now faced a world that had continued moving while they remained trapped. Technology had changed dramatically. When Michelle disappeared in 2002, smartphones did not exist as part of everyday life. Social media had not yet transformed communication. Streaming services were unknown. By 2013, people carried the internet in their pockets. Friends communicated through apps that had never existed when the women vanished. Entire cultural trends had come and gone. Music had changed. Fashion had changed. Politics had changed. The outside world had become almost unrecognizable. Simple tasks became unfamiliar. Walking into a supermarket filled with hundreds of choices could feel overwhelming. Using modern technology required learning skills that most people had developed gradually over the previous decade. The survivors were not only rebuilding emotional lives. They were adapting to a different world. Michelle Knight carried perhaps the deepest emotional scars. She had endured the longest captivity. She had spent nearly 11 years inside the Seymour Avenue house. She had survived repeated violence, isolation, and unimaginable physical suffering. Yet those who met her after the rescue often described extraordinary determination. She refused to allow Ariel Castro to define the rest of her life. One of the first important decisions she made was reclaiming her own identity. Later, she chose to change her name to Lily Rose Lee. For many survivors of severe trauma, changing a name is not about forgetting the past. It is about creating space for the future. It is a declaration that the worst thing that happened to someone will not become the only thing that defines them. Michelle spoke publicly about forgiveness in a way that surprised many people. Her words were often misunderstood. She never excused what Castro had done. She never minimized the suffering. Instead, she explained that carrying hatred forever would continue giving him power over her life. Forgiveness, in her understanding, became an act of freeing herself rather than freeing the man who had imprisoned her. Not everyone agreed with her perspective. Many could not imagine offering any form of forgiveness after such horrific abuse. But healing is deeply personal. Every survivor finds a different path. Amanda Berry approached recovery with equal courage, but different priorities. She now faced an additional responsibility. She was not only rebuilding her own life. She was raising a daughter. The little girl born inside captivity had entered the outside world without understanding how unusual her early childhood had been. Amanda focused on giving her daughter something she herself had lost. A normal life. School. Friends. Parks. Birthdays. Family gatherings. Ordinary moments that many parents take for granted became precious victories. Amanda understood that freedom was not only her own. It belonged to her daughter as well. She also faced another painful reality. Her mother, Luana Miller, had died years before the rescue. Amanda would never again hear her mother's voice. Never embrace her. Never thank her for refusing to stop searching. One of the cruelest consequences of long-term captivity is that time continues stealing things even while the victim survives. Amanda had lost years. She had also lost the chance to say goodbye. In interviews after her rescue, she spoke with love about her mother while carrying the sadness of knowing they would never meet again. Gina de Jesus chose a quieter path. The youngest of the three victims had entered captivity as a 14-year-old schoolgirl. She emerged as a young adult. Her family surrounded her with support and privacy. Unlike many high-profile survivors, Gina preferred to stay away from constant media attention during the early years. That decision reflected something important. Survivors should never feel obligated to share their pain publicly. Healing does not require publicity. It requires safety. Later, Gina gradually became involved in advocacy work supporting missing children and their families. She understood the fear experienced by parents searching for answers. She understood uncertainty in a way few others could. Helping others became part of her own recovery. Together, the three women remained connected by an experience no one else could fully understand. Although each followed a different path, they shared something unique. They had survived together. During captivity, they had become each other's source of hope. That bond could never be erased. Meanwhile, Cleveland struggled with its own questions. The city celebrated the rescue. But celebration was accompanied by reflection. People asked difficult questions about the years before May 2013. Could warning signs have been recognized? Were opportunities missed? Could the women have been rescued earlier? These questions did not always have simple answers. Several reviews examined aspects of the investigation. Authorities acknowledged that Michelle Knight's disappearance, in particular, had not received the same sustained attention as the disappearances of Amanda Berry and Gina de Jesus. Her difficult personal circumstances had influenced early assumptions. The lesson became painfully clear. Every missing person deserves to be taken seriously. Lifestyle. Age. Personal history. Financial situation. None of these factors should reduce urgency when someone disappears. The case also changed conversations about long-term captivity. Psychologists explained why victims often cannot simply escape when opportunities seem obvious from the outside. Years of threats, violence, and psychological domination reshape the way people perceive risk. Survival becomes the only goal. Many misconceptions surrounding captivity began to disappear as experts helped the public understand trauma more accurately. The Seymour Avenue house itself quickly became a symbol. People traveled simply to look at it. Flowers appeared outside. Candles were left on the sidewalk. Media crews continued broadcasting from across the street. But many residents believed the building should not remain standing. To them, it represented suffering rather than history. Later in 2013, the decision was made to demolish the house. On demolition day, heavy machinery arrived while survivors and community members watched. The walls that had hidden so much pain began collapsing. Wood splintered. Brick crumbled. Dust rose into the air. Within minutes, the structure that had imprisoned 3 women for nearly 11 years no longer existed. The demolition carried powerful symbolism. Destroying the building could not erase memories. It could not undo the crimes. But it prevented the house from becoming a permanent monument to Ariel Castro. The focus shifted away from the prison and back toward the survivors. Ariel Castro himself would never spend decades serving the sentence imposed upon him. Only 1 month after receiving life imprisonment plus 1,000 years, prison staff found him hanging inside his cell. Despite emergency efforts, he died shortly afterward. His death generated immediate debate. Some people felt angry that he would never experience the long years of imprisonment he had forced upon his victims. Others believed his death changed nothing. The women had already reclaimed their freedom. His life no longer determined theirs. Perhaps the most meaningful response came not from public opinion, but from the survivors themselves. Their futures would not be measured by Ariel Castro's death. They would be measured by their own lives. Years passed. Amanda became a journalist and advocate focusing on missing persons. Gina worked with organizations helping families facing similar tragedies. Michelle continued speaking publicly, writing about resilience, survival, and hope while encouraging others living with trauma. Each woman transformed unimaginable suffering into something that could help others. None of them claimed recovery was easy. Trauma leaves permanent marks. Certain memories never disappear completely. Some days remain harder than others. Healing is rarely a straight path. It moves forward, then backward, then forward again. But healing remains possible. The story of Seymour Avenue is remembered because of the crimes committed there. Yet perhaps it should be remembered for something even greater. 3 women entered that house separately. 1 in 2002. 1 in 2003. 1 in 2004. Each believed she was completely alone. Instead, they found one another. Together they endured years that should have broken the human spirit. Yet when the opportunity finally came, they did not abandon each other. Amanda's escape became Michelle's escape. It became Gina's escape. Their survival became shared. Their courage became shared. Their future became shared. The world first knew them as missing girls. Then as victims. But history remembers them most accurately as survivors. Because Ariel Castro succeeded in stealing years from their lives. He failed to steal the rest of them. And that, more than any courtroom sentence, became his greatest defeat.